Before we start, I would encourage you to have a set of the sermon notes. If you don't already have them, just go to the link below. You'll be able to print a set of the sermon notes from that link. Also, would encourage you to have some communion elements. You want to have some bread or a cracker. You want to have some juice or wine. If you don't have juice or wine, probably anything to drink would work. But you want to have those communion elements because here in about 20 minutes, when we get to the end of the sermon, we'll move right into a time of communion. So, if you need any of those things, I would encourage you to pause the video right now. Get whatever you need. Once everything is ready, then go ahead and resume the playback. So a question for you. Have you ever watched that reality TV show called Undercover Boss? Have you ever watched that? I was surprised to discover that the TV show Undercover Boss has been around for over 15 years. And I can honestly say that over the past 15 years, I have watched that show once or maybe twice. I'm not even sure that I watched an entire episode. But you can pretty much tell the premise of the show just from the title of the show. It is a show where they take the CEO of some major corporation, or maybe they take the owner of some major sports team, or in some cases they've even taken the mayors of cities. And they've had them disguise themselves so they'd be unrecognizable and then start working an entry-level job for the company or for this sports team or for the city. And then, of course, they follow around these new employees to see what they discover as they are working with other entry-level employees. And as you would imagine, of course, there are times when they discover that there are other entry-level employees who are working hard and are doing a great job. And conversely, they are also discovering that there are some employees that are just phoning it in. Not only is that true with the entry-level employees that they encounter, but that's also true with the lower-level management that sometimes they have to report to. And as you would imagine, at the end of every hour, suddenly this CEO or this team owner or this mayor of the town suddenly reveals that, ta-da, they are the owner of the entire company, or they are the owner of the team, or they are the mayor of the city. And then certain employees are rewarded for being diligent and working hard, and others face the converse consequences. But the reason that I'm talking to you about this idea of undercover boss is because there's a certain degree, at least to me, in which the passage we're about to take a look at almost feels a little bit like an episode of Undercover Boss. So see if you agree with me. Right now we're going to take a look at the lectionary gospel reading for April 19th of 2026. This is Luke chapter 24, verses 13 through 35. It is the passage in its entirety. It is a lengthy passage, so I'm going to try to read fast. Now, that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And, what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going farther, but they urged him strongly, "Stay with us. It's nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him as he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and said, "It is true, the Lord is risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. May God bless the reading of the powerful and the fascinating and the inspiring word. So this is a passage with which I'm guessing you are familiar. This is the story of the two disciples encountering Jesus. And when I say disciples, I don't mean 2 of the 12 that now is down to 11, not 2 of the capital D disciples, but 2 of the lowercase d disciples. 2 of Jesus' followers who encountered him on the road to Emmaus. So let's do what we always do. Let's talk through the passage. As I said at the start, this is a lengthy passage. As you saw, I'm going to try not to spend too much time going through this passage line by line. I'm going to try to kind of go through it fairly quickly so that we will have some time then to talk about 3 of the important lessons that this passage has for us as Jesus' modern day disciples. Now, having said that I wasn't going to go over it with too fine-tooth a comb, I want to point out to you that in the very first line of this passage, that it tells us that this was the same day. The same day as what? Well, the same day as the resurrection was discovered by Mary Magdalene and Mary of Clopas. The passage that we looked at last week, where the 2 women went on the first day of the week and discovered that the tomb was empty, and then an angel spoke to them, and then Jesus appeared to them. It's that same day. It's just hours after that took place. It says that now we've got 2 of Jesus' followers, lowercase d disciples, that are heading away from Jerusalem. They've left. They're heading for a little village called Emmaus. They're talking about what's happened, and as they are talking with each other, Jesus comes and joins them, which probably would not have been terribly unusual, because we know that for the Passover feast that there were well over probably 100,000 devout Hebrew people who had come to Jerusalem. Well, now Passover is in the rearview mirror. Now they're all heading back to their hometowns. So this would not have been unexpected. And Jesus asked them, and it tells us that they were kept from recognizing Jesus. So something supernatural is taking place that's preventing them from recognizing Jesus. And Jesus says, "What are you talking about?" And, at this point they could have said, "Who are you? It's none of your business." But they instead engage with Jesus, and they say, "Haven't you heard? Don't you know what's happened?" And Jesus kind of plays dumb, and he says, "No, tell me what's happened." And so they start talking about Jesus. It's interesting because, of course, as we've already said, these weren't 2 of the 12 or 2 of the 11 remaining disciples, but they were 2 of Jesus' followers. It's interesting hearing how they describe him. They say that Jesus of Nazareth was a prophet, powerful in word and deed. And so they say that this is the person that they had hoped was going to redeem Israel. So once again, it speaks to what we've already spoken about during this sermon series, the idea that he was going to be a political Messiah, that he was going to be this revolutionary Messiah that was going to overthrow the Romans. And of course, that isn't who Jesus was going to be. Then they tell him, "Look, we've heard that 2 of the people that are a part of Jesus' followers, that they went to the tomb, they had a vision." It's interesting that they describe it as a vision of angels. And they said, so they went and told the 11, and then the Some of them went and investigated, and they found that the tomb was empty, just as these women had said. Now, it's at this point that Jesus jumps in. And it's interesting to me that it seems like Jesus is being pretty harsh with them. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. Jesus, after they've talked about their disappointment that Jesus was put to death, and they thought that he was going to be the Messiah, Jesus says, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and enter his glory?" Now, again, I know we've talked about this previously as well, but on multiple occasions, Jesus said very clearly to the disciples that he was going to be put to death, that he was going to rise again. Multiple occasions he said it very clearly, and there were a dozen more occasions in which he spoke, at least in a roundabout way, that this was going to happen. And so Jesus is frustrated with these two followers, these lowercase d disciples, that they still don't get it. And so he, it says, explains the whole thing, how this was always the plan. It says that he starts by talking about Moses, which means he's starting at the very beginning of the Old Testament. Talks about the prophets, which is kind of the rest of the Old Testament, and explained all that was in the scriptures concerning himself. Now, of course, Jesus wasn't saying, "I'm the guy," yet. And so, excuse me, it says that they're getting close to Emmaus, and Jesus then acts like he's going to continue on. And they say, "Wait a minute, it's almost night. No, you don't need to go any further at this point. Come in and you can stay with us, and we'll feed you." They show hospitality to Jesus. Even though Jesus has kind of just chewed them out, they show hospitality to Jesus. And so it says that then when they're at the table, Jesus takes the bread and he breaks it and he blesses it. And it says that at that moment, their eyes are opened. So again, it sounds like something supernatural is taking place, and they are allowed to recognize what they should have recognized all along, that this is actually Jesus who's in their midst. And it says that at that moment, Jesus disappears. And it says then that they say to each other, "I knew there was something remarkable about him. There was something special about him," as he was explaining the scriptures to us as we were walking along the road. And so it says that at that point that they returned to Jerusalem at night, which is a 7-mile trek at this point. So God bless them for making that trip, but they had to go and tell the 11 remaining disciples what they had just experienced as well. And so, what are the lessons that you and I can take away from this fascinating, and I think this very profound and encouraging passage? Well, there are probably more than 3, but we'll focus on 3 of those lessons right now. And the first lesson is this: as disciples, we should always extend hospitality. As disciples, we should always extend hospitality. You know, one of the things that I appreciate about living in the Midwest, about living specifically in the state of Nebraska, is that people here truly are friendly. And I think that you probably know that there are other places in the United States where they have a reputation for being not as friendly. And look, I absolutely, truly am not judging that. I'm just stating that that is the reputation that other portions, other regions in the United States that they have. And compared to the other places that I've lived about 6 different places over the course of my life, all around the United States. I can honestly say that Nebraska is the friendliest place that I've ever lived. And I think that a lot of Nebraskans would have extended similar hospitality, but at the same time, we know that that wouldn't be true in other parts of our nation. We know that that wouldn't be true in other parts of the world. And so, I appreciate the fact that when Jesus, this stranger that they don't recognize, comes up and says, "Hey, tell me what you're talking about," they don't say, "None of your business." They engage Jesus in conversation. When they get to Emmaus, where they are going to be stopping, they see that Jesus is going to continue. They say, no, don't continue on. It's almost night. Not going to be safe for you. Come in and we're going to feed you. So again, extending hospitality. And the reason that I want to focus on this idea of hospitality is because it is an incredibly important aspect of the Christian life. And it's one that we don't talk about a lot, but it's so important for all of us as Christ followers, as disciples, to practice hospitality. Hospitality is listed as one of the spiritual gifts in the New Testament. And I think a lot of times it gets overshadowed by the other spiritual gifts in the New Testament. The New Testament talks about preaching and teaching and leadership. And a lot of times we tend to focus on the people who have been given those spiritual gifts. What I'm saying is, do not overlook the spiritual gift of hospitality. It is incredibly important. And to those of you who have the spiritual gift of hospitality, even though you probably don't get a lot of recognition for it, I deeply appreciate you, and I deeply appreciate it when you practice that spiritual gift. It's important, incredibly important. So that is the first lesson we should take away from this passage. The second is this: as disciples, we should always keep our hearts open to the truth. As disciples, we should always keep our hearts open to the truth. Now, I kind of pointed this out as we were going through the passage, but I want to place an even closer emphasis on it now. In this passage, Jesus was pretty short, was pretty sharp, was pretty blunt, was pretty rude. You pick the adjective that you want to use here, but Jesus, I think, was pretty direct with these two and said some things to them in a way that if I had been one of them, I probably would have shut Jesus out. I don't like saying that. I kind of hate to admit that, but sometimes I can be kind of thin-skinned. And if Jesus had spoken to me the way that he spoke to the disciples here, I probably would have just stopped listening at this point. I appreciate the fact that they didn't. Not only did they not stop listening to Jesus at this point, but even when they got to Emmaus and Jesus acted like he's just going to keep going, they said, no, wait a minute. After he was just pretty short with them, they said, come on in and we'll feed you. We'll take care of you. I appreciate the fact that they kept their hearts open, because Jesus had just shared with them something that for the rest of the New Testament is going to be incredibly important. The way that they had the Old Testament and all of the prophecies explained to them, that's key to the Gospels and to the epistles, every part of the New Testament. And I know that all of us, myself included, we all have our preferred sources of information. My guess is that you have a certain news channel, a certain news network that you prefer. My guess is that you have certain newspapers or certain magazines that you prefer. My guess is that there are certain commentators on TV or on TikTok or wherever that you prefer. Those are the people that you want to get your information from. I get that. That's fine. But one of the things that's incredibly important is for us to listen to other sources of information. We can't put ourselves in a silo. These two decided not to put themselves in a silo, even after Jesus really kind of spoke down to them for all intents and purposes. And I would encourage you just to be open to truth wherever it comes from. Maybe that truth might come from a different news network. Heaven forbid that you might listen to a different news network and might actually choose to say, you know what, they're right about that. Or a different newspaper, or a different magazine, or a different TV commentator, or a different TikToker, whatever the case may be. These two disciples kept their hearts open, and that's what you and I need to do as well, because you and I might be surprised where we will find an important truth in the future. So that's the second lesson. The third lesson we should take away from this passage is this. As disciples, we must remember that Jesus is always nearby. As disciples, we must remember that Jesus is always nearby. Now, in this passage, these two lowercase d disciples were walking with Jesus, and they had no idea until he broke the bread and shared it with them. And that was when suddenly they were supernaturally allowed to recognize Jesus for the first time. This had been Jesus with them. And one of the things that I think you and I often take for granted is that Jesus is always near us as well. Let me give you a for example. For example, I just sat down to start recording this video about 20 minutes ago. Now, let's say, just for fun, that when I sat down and pressed record, that seconds later, Jesus walked in, and he sat down at the other end of the table from where I am right now. How do you think I would feel at that point? Do you think I'd be a little bit nervous? Do you think I would be concerned about, boy, I hope what I'm about to say is correct? I'd be thinking to myself, man, I wish that I would have studied more commentaries and that I would have put more time in preparation to this sermon. You better believe that's how I'd feel. And you know what I'm going to say next. What I'm going to say next is that is actually precisely what is happening at all times for us. Jesus is always nearby. When you are watching this sermon video, there's me, there's you, and what does Matthew chapter 18 say? It says, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, that Jesus is there with them. So as I'm talking to you, as you're watching this video, Jesus is with us. We may not see him, but he's with us. Anytime we get together over in the sanctuary on Sunday mornings, Jesus is with us over there. I'm going to take it a step further, and I'm going to point out to you that Jesus, when he was talking about those who needed help, he said, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I had no clothing, you clothed me, and so on and so forth. And in this particular case, Jesus says, whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. And so there's yet another occasion when we see people that are in need. There's another occasion when we see Jesus. But what I want to do right now, because I'm getting real short on time, is I want to go back to the moment when Jesus broke the bread with these two lowercase d disciples. And I want us to carry on that tradition. Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread. He gave thanks, and he broke it and said, this is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And this cup is the new covenant. Do this whenever you drink in remembrance of me. I want to invite you to grab your communion elements. I'm going to grab mine, and I'm going to invite you to partake with me at this time. And here in about 25 seconds, this video is going to cut me off. But even as it cuts me off, I want you to continue taking your communion. I invite you to partake with me. The body of Christ, broken for us, we partake in remembrance of him. And the blood of Christ, shed for us, we drink in remembrance of him. Let us pray. God, we thank you for appearing to these two lowercase d disciples.